Purgatorio, Canto 31, Earthly Paradise. The stage is set in the previous canto, Canto 30, where Beatrice delivers her monologue to the angels, explaining why she shames him, being Dante, so. What I find interesting is that her recount of Dante's sin is much longer and more detailed than Dante's. In Canto 30, Beatrice is depicted as an admiral who speaks to encourage a task, says Dante. We learn in her long speech that after Beatrice dies, he, quote, took himself away from me, and so also, quote, the way of righteousness, and followed after another. He followed counterfeits of goodness, Beatrice says. That another would be other women, Lady Wisdom and other sirens. So if the verdict has been read, what is left for Dante if not to pay the, quote, debt of penitence that's paid when tears are shed? In other cantos, Dante frequently implies that Beatrice has mind-reading qualities, anticipating which questions Dante is about to ask, such as in the example of Canto 4 of Paradiso, where she's able to read which two questions are worrying him without him saying that. So what makes this case different? The answer lies exactly at the crux of this canto. As explained in the 100 videos of Dante, Canto 31, is where Dante experiences penance. Three elements to penance are contrition of heart, confession, and absolution. Contrition is a Latin word for breaking, and Thomas Aquinas defines it as breaking away from his own rigid and prideful judgment and being softened to obey the judgment of God. So let's begin with his contrition. The canto opens with Beatrice demanding that Dante confesses to what she had accused him of in Canto 30. And here, perhaps for the first time, we see Dante being unable to speak, not describe what he saw, for there's plenty of horrors he finds hard to describe, but physically, anatomically, struggles to speak. This fear. When she demands him to tell if this is true, he musters out a feeble, barely audible yes, having no life in him to profess, quote, such self-accusation. He bursts into tears. He feels belittled and helpless as a child would, or as Beatrice would later say, a fledgling bird that knows not how to fly. Then, weeping, Dante moves to the second step of penance and confesses, quote, mere appearances turned me aside with their false loveliness as soon as I had lost your countenance. Can we say that Dante skillfully places blame on the appearances that turned him aside instead of assuming responsibility and saying, I have turned aside? I will let you decide. Now she goes on to tell him how he should have acted when she died, so he would know better when he returns to earth. Quote, nature or art had never showed you any beauty that matched the lovely limbs in which I was enclosed. And if the highest beauty failed you through my death, what mortal thing could then induce you to desire it? No green young girl or other novelty, such brief delight, should have weighted down your wings, awaiting further shafts. Beatrice is now in the role of a teacher, telling him exactly that he shouldn't have been distracted by earthly pleasures, but should have, quote, lifted up your wings to follow me. Augustine would have agreed with Beatrice, for when his own friend died, he said, I should have lifted myself to you, Lord, to find a cure. I knew that, but did not wish it or have the strength for it. But as we know from Beatrice in Canto 5 of Paradiso, the power of free will which God gifts us must be surrendered to God, because our own will move us like a feather at each wind, finding no rest. Which is what Dante experiences when he gets scattered among the sirens and momentary pleasures of the world. Next thing he sees is Beatrice turned towards the eternal animal that is with its two natures but one person. The animal that Dante alludes to here is the griffin, which with its two natures, lion and eagle, represents Jesus Christ, who also has two natures, a man and a god. At that moment, Beatrice's beauty seemed so to surpass her former self in beauty as here on earth she had surpassed all others. This beauty of hers made him feel such remorse that, quote, things that once most lured my love became most hateful to me. Dante has a change of nature, which according to him, he no longer desired those earthly things because they couldn't compare to Beatrice's beauty in heaven. and this self-indictment causes Dante to lose his senses and collapse or faint. Let's take a brief pause again and remember the last time we saw Dante faint. It was at the encounter of Paolo and Francesca in Canto 5 of Inferno. That time too, Dante fainted from all the guilt he felt for the misdirected love between the two fallen lovers. We are at last at the point of Dante's baptismal dipping into the river Lethe, a river of forgetfulness. He wakes up to see a woman, Matilda, dragging him through the river to the shore where Beatrice stands. He hears "Asperges me," or "You will sprinkle me" from Psalms being sung. Sweetly, Dante adds. This is the last and third part of his penance, absolution. Matilda dips him under water, cleansing him of his sins and the memory of his sins. Then Dante joins the Dance of Four Lovely Ladies, also known as Four Cardinal Virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. They tell Dante something interesting about Beatrice. Before she had descended to the world, we were assigned as her handmaids. So was Beatrice predestined to have these four cardinal virtues on earth? Is she one of those better fruits who came to earth? In Dante's world, at least, she is. Then these nymphs point Dante towards the three higher theological virtues: hope, faith, and charity, who, quote, see more deeply, who'll help you penetrate her joyous light. They come closer to Beatrice, who was still looking at the griffin, and now the three theological virtues chanted. Turn, Beatrice, oh, turn your holy eyes upon your faithful one, who that he might see you has come so far. Out of your grace, do us this grace, unveil your lips to him, so that he may discern the second beauty you have kept concealed. The second beauty here being Beatrice's smile, which Dante says in his text Vita Nuova, enraptures him with a sweetness that cannot be described in words. Again, I want to draw your attention to the fact that Dante is not the one pleading with Beatrice, but the Lady Virtues are. It would have been so different if Dante was the one asking, but it seems he needed higher powers, or more worthy powers, speaking to Beatrice on his behalf. Probably because he was still so transfixed by the reflection of the griffin's changing nature in her eyes that he couldn't speak. The last imagery we are left with in this canto is Beatrice's eyes that are facing God. It spurs Dante's appetite for truth. He says, "My soul tasted that food which even as it quenches hunger spurs the appetite." So Beatrice's plan worked. Dante's longing is now for God, getting a glimpse of him and wanting more. Now he is prepared to enter Paradiso. An interesting point was brought up by writer David Auerbach. He says that it's a paradox that his sins are being erased in the river Lethe, and yet he still remembers them as he tells us this story. To explain why I picked Canto 31 of Purgatorio, I have to refer to my own birth sign, which is Libra. And as a Libra, I am known to have a hard time making decisions, and so picking one particular sin or story seemed to me a task most difficult. I felt like I could empathize and notice my own guilt in each terrace, so I chose Canto 31, the culmination of Dante's tour of all the sins. For me, perhaps like for Dante too, contemplation of other sins is much easier than purgation of my own. It's painful, scary, and the pride of the ego tries very hard to avoid it. However, just like in life, there comes a moment of no return, when one must face the part of themselves they can no longer endure. For me, I had a moment in my life when everything changed. I decided that I needed to start a new life, and I chose to come to America. When I made that choice, I got a fever higher than I ever experienced, culminating in an operation to remove all 4 wisdom teeth. Talk about contrition. I had so much fear of moving forward and making the wrong decision that I couldn't speak. I was so scared of the unknown. I was too proud to make a mistake. But I had to surrender to God's will, and His will brought me here. So what is the significance of this canto for all of us? Well, several things. First, you don't know who God will send into your life to show you the path towards God and the better good. Perhaps you already have that person in your life. It could be your mentor, your teacher, your friend, or your partner. But most importantly, perhaps you are that person for someone else. Perhaps your eyes are turned towards the better good, towards God. perhaps for someone else, you are Beatrice.